The light in my dressing room is my favorite trick. It's not just light, it's an engineered atmosphere. My husband, Silas, spent a week calibrating the LEDs to mimic the exact color temperature of the golden hour just before sunset on the Amalfi Coast. The most forgiving light in the world, he declared, looking more proud of the fixture than of our actual trip to Italy. It's the kind of light that smooths away reality, making you believe you're flawless, that the tiny anxieties the day has etched around your eyes are just figments of your imagination. I ran a hand down the silk of a sapphire blue dress, the fabric feeling like cool water against my skin. It was just one of 7 new acquisitions from my last therapy session on Fifth Avenue, each hanging with reverent space in a closet bigger than my first apartment. This house, our house, was less a home and more a gallery of my success. Or rather, Silas's success, which I had artfully curated into a reflection of my taste. Every piece of stark, minimalist furniture, every oversized art book on the coffee table pages still crisp and unread, every perfect white orchid that was replaced by a florist twice a week, it was all part of the brand. The brand of Alara. Elegant, effortless, enviable. My Instagram feed was a testament to this illusion, a carefully constructed narrative of a perfect life, set against the backdrop of a perfect home. And then there was Silas, my husband, the silent, steady engine that powered this whole beautiful machine. He was a genius, they said. A sonic engineer whose name was whispered with reverence in architectural digests and recording studios. Men in bespoke suits flew him across the country on private jets to make their billion-dollar concert halls and state-of-the-art studios sound perfect. It was a field so ridiculously niche, so deeply, profoundly uninteresting to me, that I'd long ago stopped pretending to understand it. When he'd try to explain his work, his eyes alight with a passion I found frankly baffling, my mind would drift. Baffles and diffusers, resonant frequencies, acoustic absorption. It was all just a foreign language, a static hum beneath the clear melody of the life his work afforded me. I glanced at the framed photo on my marble vanity. It was us at the Met Gala 2 years ago. I looked radiant in a custom silver gown, my smile a brilliant, practiced curve. Beside me, Silas looked, well, like Silas. Not movie star handsome, not by a long shot. Average height, with kind, intelligent eyes behind his designer frames and dark hair that was already staging a strategic retreat from his forehead. He had a soft middle that spoke of late nights fueled by takeout, and a complete indifference to the gym membership I paid for. But his eyes in the photo were fixed on me, full of a quiet, unwavering admiration I had learned to expect, like the turning of the seasons. He wasn't exciting, but he was my provider, my rock-solid, predictable foundation. He was the price of admission to this life, and I had long ago decided it was a price worth paying. My phone buzzed, the vibration a sharp intrusion against the polished marble. It was him. "Hey," I answered, pitching my voice into that sweet, airy melody I knew he loved. It was my happy wife voice. "Hey, Alara." "Bad news, I'm afraid," he said. "We hit a snag with the resonant frequencies in the lower register of the main hall." My mind immediately began to drift. I pictured the new Chloe handbag I'd seen online. Should I get it in cream or tan? "So the whole installation is behind schedule," he was saying. "But listen, the real reason I'm calling is something's come up. The Nashville project, the big one for the new symphony hall. They've had a structural issue they didn't anticipate, and it's throwing all my acoustic models out of whack. They need me on site this weekend to consult." All there. I performed the requisite pout into the receiver, letting out a small, disappointed sigh. "This weekend? But Silas, I was looking forward to a quiet one with you. I was going to make that risotto you love." It was a perfect lie, delivered with the casual skill of a seasoned actress. I hadn't planned on making anything more complicated than a reservation. "I know, I'm so sorry," he said, and the genuine regret in his voice was almost pitiable. He was always so sorry for the demands of the job that paid for the very air I breathed. "It's just for 2 nights. I'll fly out tomorrow morning, be back Sunday evening. I'll make it up to you, I promise. We can go to that new French place you wanted to try, the one with the impossible reservation." "It's fine," I said, my mind already lighting up, the possibilities unfurling like a bolt of silk. An empty house. A perfect, sound-proofed, beautifully lit stage for myself. "Work is important. You do what you have to do. You're the best, Alara. I really am the luckiest man in the world. I smiled at my reflection as I hung up. Yes, you are, I whispered to the empty room. My thumbs flew across my phone's screen, a flurry of motion as I opened my group chat with Peyton, Quinn, and Avery. The Holy Trinity, we called ourselves. Emergency Girls' Night, I typed, a thrill of anticipation shooting through me. The acoustics wizard is out of town. My house. Tomorrow at 7, bring the best wine and all the secrets you've been saving. The replies came in a flood of champagne bottle emojis and exclamation points. I looked at my reflection in the vast, golden-lit mirror. The woman looking back at me was smiling, a genuine, unforced smile for the first time all day. She had everything she had ever wanted. Tomorrow night, the house wouldn't be a silent sanctuary of sound. It would be mine. It would be filled with laughter and truth, my truth. And there was nothing more intoxicating than that. By 9 o'clock the next evening, the house was alive. The carefully engineered silence had been joyfully violated. The third bottle of expensive rosé was open, its condensation leaving a pale ring on the travertine coffee table, a minor transgression that would have made Silas visibly flinch. The air, usually so still and filtered, was thick with the competing scents of diptyque candles and expensive perfume. My carefully curated playlist of unapologetic female pop anthems was humming from the built-in speakers that Silas was so proud of. Everything was perfect, but this time it was a perfect of my own making. This house is still insane, Peyton said, stretching her long, sculpted legs out on the plush white sofa. As a high-end fitness instructor, her body was a walking advertisement for her brand of brutal discipline. Her personality was much the same, direct and unforgiving. I feel like I need to pay an admission fee just to breathe this air. It's Silas's masterpiece, I said, topping off her glass with a dismissive wave of my hand. He's more in love with the sound, dampening panels in the walls than he is with me, I swear. They all laughed, the sound a warm, conspiratorial wave of validation. We had moved past the trivialities of work gossip and were now deep in the main event, the sacred ritual of any true girl's night, dissecting the men in our lives. It was the best part, the moment the polite, public-facing masks came off and the raw, unfiltered truths were allowed to breathe. Quinn was complaining about her husband's infuriating habit of leaving wet towels on the bed, while Avery, ever the romantic, was gushing about a new artist she'd just started seeing. Okay, new game, Peyton announced, her eyes gleaming with the particular brand of mischief that 3 glasses of wine always produced in her. Let's rate them. 1 to 10. On everything. Looks, personality, performance. With commentary. No holding back. A delicious, wicked thrill shot through me. This was exactly what I needed. Avery went first, giving her artist a dewy-eyed 9. Quinn, ever the pragmatist, gave her husband a solid, if unenthusiastic, 6, citing his skills as a father but lamenting his complete lack of fashion sense. Then, all eyes turned to me. The spotlight was mine. I took a long, performative sip of wine, swirling the pale pink liquid in my crystal glass, letting the anticipation build. I felt sharp, witty, and utterly in control. Silas? I began, a small, conspiratorial smile playing on my lips. The girls leaned in, their faces a mixture of curiosity and eager encouragement. Oh, God, where to even begin? I let the question hang in the air for a moment. Let's be brutally honest, we're in the trust tree here. On a purely physical scale, he's a 5, maybe a 5.5 on a good day, if the lighting is forgiving and he's not wearing one of those god-awful polo shirts he loves. The room erupted in a chorus of giggles and scandalized gasps. It was exactly the reaction I'd hoped for. Their laughter was my fuel, my permission slip. But, I continued, raising my glass like a trophy, feeling the giddy power of my audience. The ATM? 10 out of 10. Absolutely flawless performance in that department. The direct deposits are never, ever late. The laughter became a roar. I felt powerful, seen, and incredibly funny. I was just being honest. Wasn't that what friendship was for? A safe space to voice the things you couldn't say anywhere else? Seriously. You guys have no idea how boring it is. I went on, the words tumbling out now, coated in wine and a casual, practiced cruelty I had perfected over the years. I have to actively manage him at parties. If I leave him alone for more than 5 minutes, I'll find him in a corner, with some poor schmuck, usually the host, passionately explaining the acoustic properties of their drywall. He once tried to tell me our lovemaking was like a perfectly balanced soundscape. I mean, who says that? No! Peyton shrieked, clutching her stomach. I swear to you, I said, putting a hand on my heart. His idea of romance is putting on a vintage vinyl record and giving me a lecture on the sound engineering techniques used on the drum track. It's like being married to a human textbook, but one that pays for everything. But he does pay for everything, Quinn pointed out, ever the practical one, gesturing around my magnificent living room. And that's the deal, I said with a dramatic sigh that I had perfected in front of my dressing room mirror. That's the trade-off, isn't it? I provide the aesthetics. I make the house look good. I make him look good at all those boring industry events. He provides the cash. It's a partnership. A very, very well-funded partnership. I spent the rest of the night feeling clever and invincible, the undisputed queen in her castle, holding court. I was simply speaking my truth, venting in the safety of my inner circle. What could possibly be the harm in that? As my friends finally stumbled out into the night, leaving me in the warm, boozy afterglow of the party, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. It had been a perfect night. I was completely, blissfully, unaware of the architectural marvel that was my own home, the state-of-the-art ventilation system that Silas had designed not just for air, but for sound, to carry it with perfect, crystalline clarity from the living room directly into the master suite upstairs. A flawless conduit for an imperfect truth. The house was quiet again, but it was a comfortable silence now, filled with the phantom echoes of laughter. I was humming a pop song as I gathered the empty wine glasses, feeling the pleasant, fuzzy buzz of a successful evening. I turned to take a stack of plates to the kitchen, and my heart didn't just stop, it felt like it was ripped from my chest. A gasp caught in my throat. Silas was standing in the doorway. He was a statue carved from ice. He was still in his travel clothes, his carry-on bag slumped at his feet like a dead weight. But it was his face that stole the air from my lungs. It wasn't anger. Anger I could handle. I could fight, I could soothe, I could manipulate anger. This was something else entirely. It was a hollow, silent devastation. A look of such profound and naked hurt that it felt like a violation to even witness it. He looked at me as if I were a complete stranger who had just systematically dismantled his entire world right in front of him. Silas. I breathed, my hand flying to my chest, the plates clattering against each other. My God, you scared me to death. When did you get back? Your flight. I thought you were in Nashville. The client had a family emergency, he said. His voice was alien. It was perfectly level, devoid of any emotion, as if he were a machine reading a script. The session was cancelled. I got the first flight home tonight. A cold, creeping dread began to sober me up faster than a pot of black coffee. 1,000 alarm bells were screaming in my head. When? When did you get home? Around 9, he said, his eyes never leaving my face. They weren't accusing. They were just watching. 9. The word was a gunshot in the silent room. 9 o'clock. The rating game. The ATM comment. The monologue. My blood ran cold. Where were you? I asked, my own voice a panicked, unfamiliar whisper. I didn't hear you come in. The music was on, but I heard you had friends over, he explained, his calm more terrifying than any shouting match could ever be. I didn't want to interrupt your fun, so I went upstairs to take a shower and wait for them to leave. The shower, the master bathroom, the vent, the world tilted on its axis. The beautifully decorated room seemed to warp and bend around me. I felt a wave of nausea. You heard? I managed to ask, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. Every word, he confirmed, and his voice was so quiet, so final. Every syllable. Especially the part about me being a 5 who pays for everything. It was very illuminating. You have a real talent for comedy, Alara. A frantic, high-pitched laugh escaped my lips, a sound I barely recognized as my own. Oh my God, Silas. You can't be serious. It was just stupid girl talk. We were drunk. You know how we are when we get together. We exaggerate, we say ridiculous things for effect. It meant absolutely nothing. Do I look like I'm laughing, Alara? He asked, and the sheer, unadulterated pain in his eyes was like a physical blow. I had to change tactics. Deflection. Attack. Were you spying on me? Were you listening at the vents? That's incredibly creepy, Silas. Eavesdropping on my private conversation with my friends? A flicker of something not anger, but genuine, weary confusion crossed his face. Spying? I came home to my own house. I was in my own shower. The vent system I installed, the very one you called pretentious and unnecessary, carried your voice. It's designed for perfect sound circulation. It works even better than I thought. The irony was a physical, suffocating thing. His own passion, his own genius, had become the instrument of my undoing. My mind was a panicked scramble for an excuse, an escape route, anything. You're overreacting. This is insane. Everyone vents about their partners. It's what people do. Aw, did you mean it? He cut in, his voice dangerously low, slicing through my frantic denials. That's all I want to know, Alara. When the performance was over and you were just talking with your friends, was that the truth? Am I really just an ATM with a pulse to you? Of course not, I love you, I cried, taking a desperate step toward him, my hands outstretched. But he took a sharp step back, flinching as if my touch would burn him. That's not what you said, he stated, his voice dead. You said it was a deal. A transaction. You said you make me look good, and I pay for it all. That's not love, Alara. That's a contract. A spark of my own anger, born of sheer terror, finally ignited. For God's sake, Silas, learn to take a joke. You're being so sensitive. He rubbed his temple, a gesture of absolute, soul-deep exhaustion. Jokes are supposed to be funny, Alara. Finding out that the woman you've built your entire life around sees you as nothing more than a meal ticket with a receding hairline, that's not funny. He turned and walked away, his movements stiff and deliberate. Where are you going? I called after him, my voice shaking with a panic I couldn't control. He paused at the bottom of the stairs, his back still to me. The guest room, he said, his voice muffled but clear. I can't look at you right now. Oh. The click of the guest room door shutting echoed in the cavernous silence. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard in my perfect, soundproofed house. I stood alone amidst the wreckage of my party, the scent of wine and expensive cheese suddenly nauseating. He was just being dramatic, I told myself, clinging to the familiar script of our marriage. He'd get over it. It would all be fine by morning. It had to be, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I believed my own performance. The next morning, the house was silent, in a new and terrible way. It wasn't the peaceful, engineered quiet I was used to. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, thick with unspoken words and a chilling sense of finality. The empty space in our king-sized bed felt like a chasm. There was no note on his pillow, no text message on my phone, just a profound and unsettling void where my husband used to be. I spent the day in a state of agitated denial, telling myself he was just sulking. He needed space. I'd give him space, and then I'd deploy the full force of my charm, a home-cooked meal, a new dress, a carefully worded apology, and things would snap back to normal. That's how it always worked. But by the third day of living with a ghost in my own home, my annoyance had curdled into a hot, self-righteous anger. I saw him once, a fleeting glimpse, as he left the guest room while I was in the kitchen. He didn't look at me. He looked through me, as if I were made of glass. How dare he punish me like this? How dare he be so fragile, so unforgiving? This was a silent, psychological war, and it was a war he had no right to wage over a few drunken words. On the fourth evening, he came home from work, or from wherever he had been hiding, but it wasn't my Silas. The man who walked through the front door was a stranger wearing my husband's face. The usual weariness from a long day was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that seemed to radiate from him. He walked past me in the entryway without a word, his gaze fixed on some point beyond my shoulder, and went straight to his home office. That was it. I had had enough. I followed him, my heels clicking an angry rhythm on the polished hardwood floors, ready for the fight I'd been rehearsing for days. So, this is it? I demanded, standing in the doorway of his meticulously organized office. This is your mature response? The silent treatment? For a week? How incredibly childish, Silas. He looked up from his laptop, his expression unreadable, almost clinical. I haven't been giving you the silent treatment, Alara. I've been staying at a hotel. The words knocked the air from my lungs. A hotel. While I was here, waiting, he had been somewhere else. He had already left. I needed to get away from this house, he continued, his voice as flat and clinical as a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. I needed to think without any distractions, and I've made my decision. What decision? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a cold dread washing over me. I've spent the past few days reviewing our life together, he said, and his tone was chillingly objective, as if he were analyzing acoustic data. And the patterns, they were always there. I just chose to ignore them because it was easier. I chose to believe the performance. He looked directly at me then, and his eyes were empty of everything I recognized. I remembered how you only really light up when I buy you something, how your affection is directly proportional to the balance on your latest credit card statement. I remembered our anniversary in Italy, and how you spent more time staging photos for Instagram than you did actually being with me. I remembered every time I tried to share something I was passionate about, only to see your eyes glaze over. That's not fair, I protested weakly, because a sickening part of me, a part I kept locked away, knew it was all true. That night wasn't a mistake, Alara. It wasn't an anomaly, he continued, his voice gathering a quiet, devastating strength. It was just the first time I was allowed to hear the truth. Your truth. And I've decided to stop ignoring it. He took a deep breath, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent room. I hired a lawyer yesterday. I'm filing for divorce. The word hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. It didn't feel real. Divorce? A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat, a sound of pure disbelief. You're divorcing me over one stupid, drunken comment? Are you insane? It wasn't one comment, he said, standing up from his desk. He was so calm, so methodical. It was terrifying. It was the truth. You don't love me. You love what I provide. And I can no longer live my life as the supporting actor in the Alara show. He then laid it all out, a perfectly executed demolition of my entire existence. He explained the new bank account he'd set up for me, with what he termed a generous 3-month severance. He calmly reminded me that the deed to the house was solely in his name, because I, in a moment of what I'd thought was clever self-preservation years ago, had insisted on it, saying I didn't want the financial liability. Then came the final, crushing blow. And the prenuptial agreement you signed, he said, his voice unwavering. The one you barely glanced at because you were too busy planning our honeymoon in the Maldives. It's ironclad. It protects my business, my investments, and all my premarital assets. It also severely limits any claim to spousal support. He had thought of everything. While I had been stewing in my own indignation, waiting for him to come crawling back with an apology, he had been systematically dismantling our marriage with the same precision he used to design a concert hall. You have 2 weeks to find another place to live, he stated, his voice devoid of all emotion. I'll be staying at the hotel until you're gone. Please have your lawyer contact mine. As he walked past me to leave the room, I grabbed his arm, all my carefully constructed composure shattering into a million pieces. Silas, please, I begged. The tears I hadn't known were there now streaming down my face. This is crazy. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. I'll change. For a fleeting, desperate second, I saw a flicker of the man I married in his eyes, a shadow of pain, of the love that had once been there. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by that unbreakable, crystalline resolve. There's nothing to fix, Alara, he said, gently but firmly removing my hand from his arm. You showed me who you really are. And for the first time in a very long time, I believe you. And he walked out, leaving me standing alone in his office, the silent, soundproofed room suddenly feeling like a tomb. My perfect world hadn't just cracked. It had been systematically and irrevocably obliterated. And I finally realized, with a terror that was absolute, that I was completely, utterly powerless to stop it. The 2 weeks that followed were a surreal nightmare played out in slow motion. I cycled through every strategy in my arsenal, every tool of manipulation I had honed over a lifetime. First came the pleading. I left long, tearful voicemails, crafting my sobs to sound both remorseful and heartbreaking. They were never returned. Then came the seduction. I bought a ridiculously expensive lingerie set and sent him a picture with a caption that was both suggestive and vulnerable. The message was left on red. Then came the gestures. I cooked his favorite meal, osso buco, a complicated dish that took me all day, and left it in the fridge with a handwritten note filled with apologies and promises. The next day, it was in the trash, untouched. My friends, my so-called Holy Trinity, were useless. Peyton told me bluntly, "You kind of had it coming, Alara." Quinn offered vague, sympathetic murmurs before making an excuse to get off the phone. Avery just stopped answering my calls altogether. I was an island, and the tide that had once brought everyone to my shores was now rushing out, leaving me completely stranded. The day I had to move was gray and drizzling, the sky weeping the tears I no longer had. The movers I'd hired on a credit card were gruff and impersonal, wrapping my beautiful life in ugly brown paper and stuffing it into cardboard boxes. As I carried my last personal item, the framed photo from our vanity, out to my car, my Lexus, my third anniversary present, Silas was there. He was standing in the doorway of the house that was no longer mine, his arms crossed. "I've had all the locks changed," he said, his voice neutral, as if discussing the weather. "The security code for the gate and the alarm has been updated too." I looked back at the beautiful facade, at the custom entryway where he had carried me over the threshold 4 years ago, a hopeful, triumphant bride. "You're throwing everything away," I whispered, my voice raw. "Our entire marriage, over something so small." He shook his head, a look of weary finality on his face. "No, Alara, you threw it away a long time ago. I'm just cleaning up the mess." My new apartment was my personal hell. It was a cramped, one-bedroom box in a part of town I used to lock my car doors while driving through. The walls were a sickly beige, and they smelled of stale cigarettes and a previous tenant's despair. But the worst part, the truly unbearable part, was the noise. The glorious, engineered silence I had taken for granted was gone, replaced by a constant, maddening cacophony. It was a symphony of misery. My downstairs neighbors fought constantly, their shrill, angry words piercing the thin floorboards with painful clarity. The pipes in the walls groaned and clanged at all hours like a dying animal. The ancient refrigerator hummed a tuneless, off-key song that vibrated deep in my skull. And then there was the bass. A relentless, dull thump-thump-thump from the apartment upstairs that started every evening at 10 and didn't stop until 3 in the morning. It was a pulse that I could feel in my teeth, in my bones, making sleep an impossible dream. Noise pollution. I muttered to myself one night, burying my head under a cheap polyester pillow that felt like sandpaper against my cheek. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. My life was now filled with the kind of acoustic imperfections that Silas built his entire career on eradicating. I would have given anything to have him walk in, his brow furrowed in concentration, trace the sound to its source, and, with that geeky excitement of his, devise a brilliant solution to make it all quiet again. I had always rolled my eyes at his passion. Now, I was living in the torment of its absence. My boutique salary, once my fun money for shoes and lunches, was a cruel joke against the crushing reality of rent, utilities, and groceries. I had to take on more hours, forcing a smile for wealthy, demanding women who were a mirror of my former self, their casual entitlement a constant, painful reminder of everything I had lost. It wasn't enough. I started driving for a ride-share service at night and on weekends, the humiliation a bitter taste in my mouth with every new passenger who slid into the leather seats of my Lexus. I, Alara, who once attended galas, was now a glorified taxi driver. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, the last pillar of my old life fell. A tow truck, huge and vulture-like, hooked my Lexus in the apartment complex parking lot. I ran out, waving the repossession notice, pleading with the driver, but he just looked at me with bored indifference. I had missed 3 consecutive payments. I stood on the cracked pavement in my bathrobe and watched my last status symbol, my last tangible link to my old life, get dragged away. Staring at my dwindling bank account and the eviction notice taped to my door, I finally hit rock bottom. Swallowing the last, jagged piece of my pride, a piece so large it felt like it was tearing my throat, I made the call. "Hi," I said to my older sister, my voice cracking, unrecognizable even to me. "It's me. I was wondering if I could maybe stay on your couch for a little while? Just until I get back on my feet." The silence on the other end of the line was a judgment in itself before she finally, reluctantly, said yes. Life on my sister's lumpy, floral print sofa was a daily masterclass in humility. Her small suburban house was the complete antithesis of my old life. It was loud, chaotic, and sticky in places I didn't want to think about. I was allergic to her cat, a fluffy creature named Mittens, who seemed to sense my vulnerability and took a sadistic pleasure in sleeping directly on my face, leaving me to wake up each morning with puffy, streaming eyes. My days were a monotonous cycle of helping my two nieces with their homework, folding endless mountains of laundry, and scrubbing dried ketchup off the kitchen floor. I was earning my keep, a concept so foreign to me it felt like learning a new language. The hardest part was the pity. It was in my sister's tired eyes as she handed me a cup of coffee in the morning. It was in her husband's polite but distant greetings. They saw me not as Alara, the glamorous younger sister who had married so well, but as a project, a failure, a cautionary tale living on their couch. One gray afternoon, while the kids were at school and the house was blessedly quiet, I was engaging in my favorite form of self-torture, scrolling through Instagram. I would look at my own old photos, me on a yacht in Greece, me clinking champagne glasses at a gallery opening with a toxic cocktail of nostalgia and bitterness, and then I saw it. It wasn't on my feed, but on the feed of a friend, a woman I barely knew. A tag had led me there. It was a photo of Silas. He was standing in front of a stunning, modern glass and steel building, the new Wagner Symphony Hall. He was beaming, a genuine, unforced smile that reached all the way to his eyes. He looked younger, happier, and thinner. His arm was wrapped around a woman. I zoomed in, my heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm. She was plain, unremarkable. She had a cascade of curly brown hair, wore glasses, and was dressed in a simple, elegant navy dress. Nothing special. Not a designer label in sight. But it was her caption, the words she had chosen to post for the world to see, that felt like a physical punch to my gut. With this amazing man at the Wagner Hall grand opening, I am just bursting with pride. So proud of your incredible, revolutionary acoustic design that is all anyone can talk about. You are a true genius, Silas. Number. Proud girlfriend number. Acoustic genius. Proud girlfriend. Acoustic genius. The words burned on the screen, searing themselves into my brain. She wasn't bragging about the event, the dress, or the champagne. She was proud of him. Of his work. The boring, nerdy, technical stuff I had actively disdained and tuned out for 6 years. She saw him not as a means to an end, but as the end itself. She saw a genius. I had only ever seen a bank account, and the way Silas was looking at her in the photo, a look of such shared joy, of deep, uncomplicated affection, he had never, not once, looked at me like that. A raw, ugly rage, born of jealousy and a profound sense of loss, tore through me. I let out a choked sob and threw my phone across the room. It hit a cushion on the sofa and bounced harmlessly onto the rug, a pathetic gesture of a powerless woman. My sister, drawn by the sound, came into the living room. She took in the scene, me, shaking with fury and grief, the phone on the floor and her shoulders slumped with a weary sigh. She sat down beside me on the couch that was now my bed. "Let me guess," she said softly, her voice devoid of judgment, which was somehow worse. "You saw him with someone new." "He ruined my life," I sobbed, the victimhood I had clung to for months boiling over like a neglected pot on the stove. "He threw me away. I don't deserve this. It was one stupid comment, one stupid night." My sister looked at me then, not with pity, but with a clear, steady gaze that had always made me feel small and transparent. "It wasn't just one comment, Alara. You know it wasn't. It was what that comment revealed. It was the truth of how you saw him, of how you saw your entire marriage. You never appreciated him. Not the real him. The brilliant, passionate man underneath all the money. And maybe he just finally decided he deserved someone who did." "So, you're taking his side?" I asked, my voice laced with the bitterness of betrayal. "I'm not taking sides," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm just saying that maybe, instead of being angry at him for leaving, you need to start being honest with yourself about why he left." Oh, I wanted to argue, to scream that she was wrong, that she couldn't possibly understand. But the fight had suddenly gone out of me, leaving behind a vast, hollow emptiness. Her words hung in the air, heavy and irrefutable. Later that night, as I lay on the lumpy couch, the cat purring its allergenic purr on my chest, I stared up at the unfamiliar shadows on the ceiling. I tried to rally my usual defenses, to cloak myself in the familiar comfort of resentment. I was the victim here. I was the one whose life was in ruins. He had overreacted. He had been cruel and unforgiving. But, for the first time, another sound managed to penetrate the noise of my own self-pity. It wasn't the neighbor's television or the groaning of the pipes. It was a voice, deep inside me, a voice I had been silencing for years. It was barely a whisper. Maybe, it said, with a terrifying, undeniable clarity. Just maybe. You got exactly what you deserved. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to drown it out, trying to summon the anger again because the anger was so much easier to bear than this cold, creeping truth. But the voice was still there. It was the quietest sound in the room, but it was the only one I could hear. It was the echo of a truth I had spent my entire marriage trying to outrun. And I had a frightening feeling that, for the first time in my life, I had nowhere left to hide.